My name is Stefan Kuhne. I'm one of the tech leads bringing Android to Chrome OS. Ha, very funny. With me today is Sara and Emilie. And we are telling you a lot about accessibility on Android applications on Chromebooks. So, and with that, well, we had that one. First off, who of you did any kind of work bringing your applications into the accessibility realm? Did anyone? Awesome. Well, you know what? You are possibly already done, but you don't have to leave now. Please stay. We have actually some more things which might be of interest for you. So, and therefore, we have hopefully some good tidbits for you. So, first of all, this is one of the questions for the rest of the folks. Why should you care about accessibility? Well, it's a very good question, right? Well, within the US, for example, 1 out of 8 people have a kind of a disability. That is a shocking big number, right? So the thing is, like, if you do not really address this in your applications, you will actually miss out on a lot of people. Or look at it like on a worldwide scale. According to World Health Organization, there's 15% of people which do not really, well, which have some kind of disability and possibly some problems with your applications if you do not access that. That is a big number. So, and then comes the very interesting part, which nobody really thinks about, that is temporal disability. That is something like what everybody has every day. When I'm coming into the office in the morning and I'm not really that awake and I'm looking at the screen and the font is teeny tiny, I will possibly use the zoom in order to zoom it up a little bit, which is already an accessibility feature in itself. So, and over the course of the day, I might actually revert everything and make it actually that the font is getting smaller and I get more information, which is then maybe the reverse, if you want to say. But the thing is, like, I'm using that thing every day. Or you were actually going to a ski trip to Lake Tahoe, and you broke a finger or your wrist or anything else. And, well, voila, try to use your keyboard. Good luck. There are problems which everybody is facing once in a while in your life. Or look at this awesome event. We have nice sunny weather, except for now when I'm looking outside. But, well, it'll come later today again. And then you're looking at your screen outside, you're trying to do something on a notebook, and you see screen glare, and you cannot see anything. So what do you do then? Well, there is actually a feature which actually might help you on that. And you might actually not be aware of it. Coming to that one later. So, and then there are other nice features, like, for example, the dictate feature, which we heard already something about in our keynote. Things like this feature is really totally awesome. When I compare that to 15 years ago, I remember on a PC, it was like you had to train everything, and it took a long time until it finally understood you. No problem at all. I'm talking to that thing, it transcribes everything, and really, try it out. It's awesome. And or do something like, well, you want to actually do something while you're working on something, and, well, you want to read out, for example, the latest article from Mercury News or something like that while you're doing this. So it's another accessibility feature, because the thing is, at that point in time, you're reading the screen. So with that, let's go into the features, what we have on Chrome OS, and look at them one by one, what you have to do in order to make these features happen, and what we are, of course, doing to do so. Oh, yeah, there was another slide. Look at that. So we have actually more form factors. Well, you know, of course, a phone. Phone is this kind of small device, right? But we have a lot of big devices. So they're coming in all kinds of forms. You have tablets, you have convertibles, clamshells, and then there's also boxes, which means like you have really like only an external screen hooked up, which is of course giant, which is awesome. So make use of the space. So, and there are keyboards and all these other things. Chrome OS in a nutshell. It's definitely much more than only a phone. So, features. So one of the most important feature, I think, is this one, which is Chromebox, which is, it reads out loud what is on the screen. It tells the user exactly what is in a dialog in a window, and it's actually guiding the user through your dialog. And this is a very important feature. And if there's any feature what you have to really do to your application to make it accessible, I think supporting this one is really it. Because things like this is addressing 90% of the problems. And that is essentially like for every label you have, no, for every screen element, you actually add another label, which is giving you the talk, what should actually be talked in this way. But Sara will actually go more into depth later on in her talk. So, yes, so next one. select to speech. I was mentioning that already. It's a great feature. You can simply mark something on the screen, and the screen reader will actually read everything to you aloud. So what do you have to do in order to support this thing? Well, you should actually have your text ordered and grouped in a certain way that it's actually really readable. But again, Sara will talk about that one later in her talk as well. Another feature is focus highlighting. That is something like, I mean, UI designers, they are really very picky. Everything needs to be exactly the color as they specify them. And sometimes that is really very nice, but not really very well distinguishable for people which cannot really see these kind of things. And sometimes I even have the problem of actually seeing what is really the focus or not. So, and this feature, for example, gives you a much better visible focus for all these kind of elements. When you're typing in something, you see, for example, a round circle around your cursor and so on, which makes it much better visual so that you can actually see this. What do you have to do in order to support this feature? Well, basically, everything what you would always do, like, for example, all the UI elements you want to use, make them that they are on the screen. So don't move them out of the screen only that they cannot be visible or something, because when you all tap through them, it might actually come active, and then you don't even see what it is. And or you should also make sure that the order of the items is actually in a proper order that you can actually really tap through them. Again, Sara Kato will actually talk about that one later on. So, with that, we have various features in regards of how to magnify the screen, to make it better visible. The first one is the docked zoom mode, which is basically we are taking apart one part of the screen, and it's actually the zoom, it's like a loop, it's where you can actually see then what is underneath the cursor. So this feature is very helpful. You can even zoom inside this area, so you can select the zoom factor you want to use. So what do you have to do in order to support this thing? Well, your application should be better resizable and or at least relayoutable so that the content is actually staying on the screen. Another nice feature is this one, which is a full screen magnifier. Basically, the desktop, everything stays exactly as it is, but there is only an area of the screen like this, which is being shown to the user on the full screen. So and then when you're swiping with your mouse over the screen, you can actually then reveal what is hidden in the virtual area of the desktop. So, and what do you have to do for this feature? Nothing. This is free of the house. We are doing that for you. I hope that helps. Another thing is, well, we have the full screen zoom factor, which is basically we are changing the density on the fly. So instead of seeing this with the teeny tiny icons there on the bottom, you can make them much bigger, and everything is getting bigger, which means bigger touch targets, bigger screen, bigger font, bigger everything, which means we are changing the density. What do you have to do in order to support this feature? Well, at the moment, you should actually be resizable, and you should actually listen to density changes. So going forward, you should definitely check out if the density of your application is changing and react then accordingly. So when you're using on configuration changes, make sure that you're reading them accordingly. So then there's a mouse. The mouse is something many people are simply like, hey, where's my mouse? Well, shake it a little bit. Oh, there it is, because you can actually see the movement. But the problem is if you cannot really see even the movement because the cursor is still too small, there's no way to see that thing. So therefore, we have a special feature where you can actually increase the size of the mouse cursor. What do you have to do to support that? Actually, not very much. In fact, nothing if you're using the standard mouse cursors. If you have a separate mouse cursor, however, you want to possibly add multiple densities for this particular resource, because otherwise it might actually look like the 80s with some kind of very jaggy lines outside, which looks interesting, but maybe not that nice. So, dictation feature. Well, you simply click into an input field, you click on the button for dictate, and you type away. Well, talk away. And what do you have to do in order to support this feature? Nothing. Comes free of the house. You're welcome. It's awesome. Another thing, high contrast mode. I was mentioning it already. If you go outside, sun glare and whatnot, you can actually put the screen into a special mode, which is actually improving the contrast. What do you have to do to support that thing? Nothing. We do everything for you. You're done. Well, then there are many, many more features, but the thing is for now, let's stay with that one. And with that, I'm passing it on to Sara.
Great. Thanks, Stefan. So I'm Sara, Kato. I've come from Tokyo, and I am a software engineer working on accessibility for Android applications running on Chrome OS. So you've just heard from Stefan the importance of accessibility, as well as some of the accessibility features that are available on Chrome OS. What I want to do is to talk to you developers as to what you can do in order to give the best possible experience for users who are using accessibility features to navigate with and interact with your application. With Chrome OS, users are going to want to use the keyboard as a means of navigating around the application by moving focus. And when you do so, you need to be aware of some of the subtle details of how users are going to interact with your application and provide appropriate feedback to users based on their interactions. You might know that since Chrome OS has been launched, it's been available in a number of different form factors, as Stefan just mentioned. To provide some examples, this includes the Samsung DeX, Huawei Desktop Mode, Xiaomi, Sony, LG, and the Pixel Slate devices. And I'm sure that you all own probably more than one type of laptop, more than one type of phone. And across these different devices, you expect your applications to work. And users who use accessibility features also expect the same experience. And when the users use Android applications on Chrome OS, they need to be able to accomplish actions without the need to rely on a mouse. And you need to be able to cater for this. When users want to use the keyboard to interact with your application, they are probably going to use the tab key. And with the screen reader that Stefan just mentioned, the tab key is what allows you to navigate linearly using Chromebox. Users can also choose to navigate through a directional manner that can move in the up, down, left, and right direction. And they can achieve this using other controls, such as a directional pad, also known as a D-pad. And in both of these cases, you need to take note of when focus does not get applied correctly. Some other types of input devices that users may want to use are trackpads, or a switch for switch access. And the types of users who might be using these are users with, say, mobility issues or dexterity issues, and they can find an alternate means to provide input and navigate around your application. So I've been talking a lot about focus, but what exactly is it? It's when the widget is highlighted to show a change of focus. So you might be doing this when you're navigating a spreadsheet, for example. When you're navigating the spreadsheet, you would often use the arrow keys to move between adjacent cells. And you would see that the cell that you're currently at is highlighted in blue. And you can also do the same in your Android application. However, in your Android application, the order in which focus is applied is determined by the order in which the elements appear in the layout or the XML. And if you find that in this case, linear navigation or even directional navigation doesn't work in the way you expect it to, then you'll need to manually specify focus. And this is what I want to talk about now. The examples that I'm going to talk to you about are going to be in Kotlin, but you should note that you'll be able to do the same using Java and XML. And I want to show you how, in order to make your application more accessible, you don't need excessive code restructuring in addition to what you've done already. It's only a little bit of extra code that you need to do in order to really help some users. The first thing that I want you to do is to set your widget to be focusable. You can do this by setting the set focusable attribute to true. Once you've done that on your widget, we can specify the behavior for directional navigation. And as I just mentioned, this is for users who might be using a D-pad or a trackball. And before this, the system will provide a best guess as to which view should receive focus based on the direction of the layout of the views of the screen. But to specify the order, we can use the set next focus attribute and specify the direction that should receive focus and provide the ID of the widget that should receive focus. And something that I want you to note is that if you fully support directional navigation in your application, it's going to make testing much easier because it's going to give you tools such as the UI Automator, and you will be able to automate a lot of your UI testing. I also talked about linear navigation using the tab key for the Chromebox screen reader. You can also specify this behavior using the set next focus forward and specifying the ID of the widget in a similar manner. I've talked a lot about using the keyboard, and we often use the keyboard as a means of convenience as well. For example, I'm sure that you all use the Enter key. You might use the Enter key to submit forms or to send messages. And this is much easier than clicking the Submit button or finding the correct location on the screen. And accessibility users also expect the same. They would expect the Enter key to be able to provide them with the same actions. And you as developers, you can also do this by setting a key listener. And I'm going to show you how to add this behavior to your application. You first start by detecting that a key was pressed down. And you'll do this using the action up. So this actually tells you when you've actually released the Enter key. And since we're using action up, you might think, well, is there an action down event? And there is. And what is the difference between these two? Well, the action down returns multiple times, and this can be used for when you're pressing the Enter key for a long period of time, for example. Whereas the action up only returns once. So maybe when you've just held the key down, like in this example. Once we've detected that we've indeed pressed the key, we can go on to detect that it was actually the Enter key that was pressed. And we can do this by using the key event and specifying that we want the Enter key. And you can change the key event, the key code of the key event, and I'll show you how to do this later. So I've talked about using the keyboard and how important it is for Android applications to be able to be accessible via the keyboard as they're able to be run on Chrome OS. And when you're adding keyboard navigation, you should remember that accessibility users are going to expect common keyboard shortcuts such as undo and redo to work. So I'll show you what you can do here. A shortcut that you all probably use every day, I know I use this every day when I'm writing my code, is the undo action. This undo action is, the keyboard shortcut is Control-Z. And let's take a look at how we will do this. So I just talked about how you can use the key code. And now in this example, let's change the key code to be Z because we're looking for Control-Z. Once we've done that, the Control key is a special key, and we need to do something that we call a meta state check. And this also applies to the Alt and the Shift keys. So once we've done that, we'll use the hasModifiers function, which returns true once this is pressed. And so now this example gives us the ability to detect the Control-Z action. You can also combine multiple hasModifiers. So in this example, we have the Control and the Shift key pressed down. So this allows us to detect the Control-Alt-Z action, which you might all know as the redo action. So another really important concept is grouping. Grouping is when related content on your application is organized into groups so that accessibility services, for example, a screen reader, will be able to announce the content in a way which would reflect its natural groupings. This means that users won't need to swipe, scan, or wait in order to find some of the additional information. So let's think about who these users might be. These users might be some blind people, my blind friend, for example. Or it might be those with, say, temporal impairments, like Stefan mentioned. Maybe you're driving home from I/O today, and you really want to use your application, but you've got to keep your eyes on the road, so we can't view the screen. Maybe it's for my grandparents, whose vision is deteriorating, and they need to use a screen reader to navigate an application. So I want to show you an example of what grouping might be like in an application. So I have an application here for a grocery store that I want to go to. This application shows the grocery item as well as the prices. And let's just see what happens if we don't specify any grouping at all. The screen reader might read out something like this: bread, OJ, $1.50, $2.99. As you've just heard, after hearing the item, it takes a while before we can hear the price. But what might a better example be? A better example might be the following: bread, $1.50, OJ, $2.99. You can immediately hear the price of bread, which is $1.50, after its announcement. The same goes for OJ. And this makes such a big difference for users who primarily rely on the screen reader. And you can do this with the power of grouping. For this, you would use the Android Screen Reader Focusable attribute. And this was introduced in Android P and Android X, and is preferred over the Android Focusable attribute, which had some unwanted effects in regards to focus and navigation for users who primarily relied on the screen reader. So in the previous example for my grocery store, you would group the item as well as the price into a single focusable container so that the screen reader will be able to present this information into a single announcement and show that these two items are related to each other. This means that users, such as you, such as my blind friend, such as my grandparents, will be able to understand that these views are logically related to one another. Another important concept that I want to talk about is labeling. So labeling, the purpose of this is to explain the meaning of interactive elements to users. I mean, I think you often put labels on physical items in everyday life, just so you get a better understanding of them. This also makes sense in the context of an Android application. This will, by adding correct labels, screen readers, such as Chromebooks, will be able to properly explain the function of the UI widgets in your applications to users. And I also think I can demonstrate this better with an example. So I have an application here, which is called Josie's Cafe. This application allows you to order items from Josie's Cafe. And let's go and look at how we structured this application. So you can see that I've added some image buttons, as well as the ID and the source attribute. Everything looks good, right? So now let's go and see what a screen reader might read. So I have a friend. His name is Reese. Reese is low vision and relies on the use of a screen reader to navigate the application. And Reese's favorite food is pizza. He really, really wants to order pizza from Josie's Cafe. So he turns on his screen reader and opens the application. What does he hear immediately? He hears button. Let's see if there's anything else available. So Reese presses tab. He hears button. OK, one last time. I'm going to press tab again to see what else I can get. Presses tab again. Button. As you can see, this type of navigation doesn't really support users such as Reese to navigate the application. But it's really easy for you to change this. And let's look at how we'll do that using labels. So I have some image buttons. So we're going to use the content description tag. And you can see here that for these content description tags, I've added the actual item that the image button represents. And the actual attributes that you might use would depend on the type of element that you have. But once I've added all my content descriptions, let's just see what the screen reader would now read to Reese. So Reese decides to give it one last shot and opens the application again. He immediately hears chocolate. OK, not really in the mood for chocolate now. Let's see what else is available in Josie's Cafe. Ew. OK, let's just hope that he doesn't end up with this. Pizza. Awesome. Reese is now able to order pizza, his favorite pizza from Josie's Cafe. As you can see, just by adding content descriptions made such a big difference to users such as Reese. So I've talked about some simple views, but if you have some more complicated or custom views in your application, you might need some additional work in order to make it more accessible. And the Android developer documentation has more detail on the specific tasks that you might need to do. So with that, I'll hand over to my colleague, Emilie.
Thanks, Sara. My name's Emilie Roberts, and I'm a developer advocate with Chrome OS. And what's my next slide? I forget. OK, there we go. We've been talking a lot about input and keyboard. And I think fundamentally, and what this talk is really about, is how users interact with and experience your applications. And we're going to talk a little bit, I'm going to talk a little bit about screens and layout, which is near and dear to my heart. And doing this right, doing all of this right, can be the difference between a user not being able to use your app at all, or at least being able to use it, for it to be convenient to use, or to be inconvenient to use. And I think where we all want to get is for your users to find your app delightful to use, natural to use. So whatever the service or content they want, is just that's the choice for your app. And I think that applies for all users. And for accessibility users, that's magnified. So I see some familiar faces, some Chrome OS fans. And I've talked about some of this stuff in my last talk. This is the dress I wear when I talk about screens and layouts, so that's why it's the same dress. If you ever see this dress, you can skip the talk. No, just kidding. We have some really great sandboxes around, so if you haven't seen your app on a Chrome OS device, check it out and see which category. Hopefully you're not in the unusable category for accessibility folks, but hopefully you're in the delightful and easy and natural, and that's where we want to go. So we're in an era of changing screens. We heard that in the keynote announcement and in many of the sandboxes. There's phones, tablets, Chromebooks, external monitors, foldables, you name it, and who knows what's coming out this year and next year. The app world is changing, and you really want your apps to just work seamlessly across all of these devices. In a big way, oh wait, I got to tell you my story. I wrote this on the slide. So I want to talk about my mom, because I bought her a Pixel book, and there's so many Android apps she would never think of using on her phone. And my mom has pretty good vision. She's very able, and just having it on a larger screen makes it so much more delightful and easier to engage with. And for many accessibility users, using an external monitor can be life-changing, or using not life-changing, but completely enabling. And using a screen reader can mean your app can be used. Cool. So for many applications, this is about layout and screen size. And the easiest way to do this, or a really great way, in my opinion, to do this, is to have different layout buckets for different screen sizes. In this case, I'm using width. So for a large landscape or a large portrait, I might have a different layout versus a mobile phone portrait or landscape. You can have 6, 8, 2 layouts depending on what your UI looks like. In the Code Lab tent, we have a resizing Code Lab, which can help you with this. My focus on my team this year has been looking at navigation patterns for large screens, especially as we see foldable devices and more external monitors happening, and of course, a growing range of Chromebooks. And they're very closely related to screen layout, but I think it deserves its own separate topic. So imagine you have a mobile phone application designed for narrow portrait screens, and you plug in an external monitor to see what that looks like, and it looks horrible, it looks terrible, and the designer should go back to design school. I'm recycling my joke from yesterday. So throw her out of the room, she's horrible. Look at that stretched out screen. This is a photo viewer, by the way. So maybe on a phone it makes sense if you have 100 photos not to try to show 100 previews on a phone screen, but on an external monitor, come on, we can do better than that. And what I think is specifically important for many users with accessibility needs is the navigation. Along the bottom, here's the bottom navigation. It's all stretched out. The icons are tiny, and they're just in this vast sea of space. So even if you're eagle-eyed and have excellent dexterity, it's very difficult to see, to understand, and to interact with these elements. And you can imagine it being literally impossible for some people. OK, I was the designer. Give me a second chance. I did a better job. I've included a photo preview on the side. I've made a little bit better use of the screen real estate. This is like moving in the direction of making my app easy and delightful, convenient to use. I've done a little bit better in the middle column. And most importantly, take a look at the navigation on the left. Side navigation, there's labels, there's icons, they're visible, and they're all grouped nicely together. So I can easily go from one to the other without having to search around on the screen. Oh, I got to go back. This live about 30 minutes ago, this beautiful, amazing photo viewing sample is available on GitHub for your perusal. It's just a little demo. It's not that amazing, but check it out. Okie dokie. More information is available on the material design site. They have a number of material studies, a number of case studies that you can look at. This is the reply app, and they're doing just this. So 4 different layouts depending on the screen size you're looking at. In the first example with the long, stretched out bottom navigation, The targets were very small, hard to see, and hard to interact with, especially for someone with any dexterity needs. We recommend a minimum touch target size of 48 dp. That's not new. Hopefully, you all know that, but it's super important for all the reasons I've just outlined. You can also use constraint layout and allow it to scale up naturally using percentages and make it easier to squish those little pink aliens. Here's just a quick example. A little bit exaggerated, but on a portrait mobile phone, why not have the icons visible and easy to interact with and clear? I don't have a lot of time left, but I just want to give a big shout out to ViewModel and Navigation and Jetpack as a whole if you haven't been using it. Check out their sandbox and the code labs and their talks and the documentation. It's awesome. As an Android developer, my main pain points have just disappeared with it. When you're handling different screen layouts, ViewModel makes state so elegant and easy to just maintain. You don't have to worry about if you're resizing on a Chrome OS app and you're getting 20 configuration changes. This is real, and it goes up and down. It can be 100 configuration changes. It's hard to handle all by yourself. If you use a ViewModel, done, finished. Finished. Navigation, if you're working with all those different navigation patterns, fragments can be a headache. Popping the stack, and if you have a fragment and a fragment and a fragment, if you know what I'm talking about, it's super hard. Navigation makes that a lot easy. d.android.com/jetpack, check it out. I'm going to take the last couple seconds just to call out something that's unique to Chromeboxes, or Chromebooks. Let me say it again. It's not necessarily unique to Chrome OS because lots of phones these days are supporting desktop mode. So it's in the Android Q APIs. Huawei, Samsung, LG, I believe, all have desktop modes. Plugging external monitors into your Android devices. On Chrome OS, this is even easier and much more common. And with Chromeboxes, it's required. There's no other screen. So we can have up to 7 external monitors. For the most part, you don't have to do anything. Your apps will just work, and the users can move them around. If you check out the recorded version of our talk, Stefan went into a bit more detail about how density works. But if you just want to do something with your activities, you can get a look at the number of displays connected to your system using the display manager. And then if you want an activity to appear on a specific display, you can use launch display ID and pop it over there. OK, couple last mentions. We have a couple of code labs. One is on resizing. One is on optimizing input for Chrome OS devices. So that's keyboard, mouse, drag and drop, all that great stuff. These have been refreshed for 2019. Accessibility has their own code lab, which goes a lot more into detail with grouping and labeling. And this has also had a nice refresh for 2019. Check that out in the code lab tense. As I mentioned, there's some great sandboxes. The accessibility and material design sandbox is over there. Over there, it's close by. So check that out, as well as our Chrome OS sandboxes where you can try out, first of all, your applications and see where you fall on the scale of unusable, convenient, and amazing, hopefully towards the A side, the amazing side. And you can also look at developing your apps right on Chromebooks for web, for game, for Android, which is also pretty cool. And don't forget, while you're there, to collect your really cool Chrome OS enamel pins. We have 7 of them with the secret 8th one, which I don't know if I'm supposed to mention, but collect them around at the Android sandbox, at the Chrome OS sandbox, at the gaming sandbox, code labs, and our office hours. With that, it's about time to say goodbye. I think accessibility matters, and you should implement it because it's the right thing to do, period. At the same time, it enables all users, for all the cases we've been talking about, including yourself. It makes your app much, much more easier to use, much more delightful to engage with, better to engage with. So you have more users, more enabled users, more happy users, more empowered users. And that's the sum of my talk. I want to say, if you take 3 things away from this, support keyboard, think about your layouts and navigation, and most importantly, add labels and grouping to your app. Adding labels and grouping can go a really long way to enable OSs to then do intelligent things with your apps and make them available to lots and lots of users. So I'd like to thank you for your time this morning. and building awesome apps, thinking about Chrome OS and all this stuff, and your energy here, and also to thank Sara and Stefan, my fellow co-presenters. Have a wonderful last day of I/O. Enjoy it. Thanks a lot.